Hello there, Marcelo here, and today we're going to talk about how to write a Ruby extension using Crystal Lang. Before we even start, if you do want to improve your skills in Ruby on Rails, there is a link in the description of a course for you to do so. And if you have any questions or comments, well, just go to the comment section, and if you like, thumbs up. So let's start. First thing that we want to do here is to create the method that we want to run directly in Ruby. So it's Crystal method. You're gonna see that Crystal is pretty simple, as we do have like the same syntax that we have in Ruby almost. So that's very similar. Let's start with simple code here that we'll call it summation, that takes an n argument, checks out if the n is less than 2, so it returns n, otherwise it returns n plus summation n minus 1. Okay, so pretty simple. It's a summation. You just receive an n, and then you sum it until you get the value 1, and then you just have the summation of all the elements under n. We are not going to check out for negatives here because the focus of this video is not about doing the best code here. It's just having this code available in Ruby. Okay, so how do we make it available in Ruby? Whenever you do require a gem in Ruby, there is a method that is run either in C or in Crystal for that sake, that's called init. So we need to have ourselves here with this init method also, because this is what we want to do. So we need to create a function called init that is going to be called, in our case, init crystal. Okay. In order to have it working, we need to also init the garbage collection, and the code that you see here is what starts the application in Crystal. So this is basically what we have right now. So we can require our code directly in Ruby, but we cannot yet use this because there are lots of things that we need to cover. For example, this is a method in Crystal and is a number that's recognized by the Crystal language, but not by the Ruby language. So we need to translate between those two environments so that they can talk the same language in the end. Okay, to do so, we're going to need to create a C binding or a lib in Crystal for that sake, which is a declaration that groups C functions and types that belong to a library. Why do we need to do that like this? Because Ruby is written in C. Therefore, we need to use that very same knowledge to work our Crystal application. So let's start with the lib, and we're going to call it Crystal with K, Crystal with K. Okay. So in here, we're going to have the code that is executed inside of the Ruby environment. So we need to understand how the Ruby environment was written, and we need to refer to the source code of Ruby. And then we're going to find out that in Ruby, the representation of an object is actually called value inside of the environment, inside of its virtual machine. So we need to do also the definition of the value so that we can use a root object ourselves. We're going to create a class. This class will have the method, and the method will call this method underneath, the method that we just created. So let's do the first declaration of a type, which is our object in Ruby, that is of the type void, a point to void. Okay, then we need to create our first object so that we can have all of the other objects inheriting from it, since in Ruby all of the objects do have a super object over it. Let's create as same as we have here in Ruby, in the Ruby language, in our Crystal extension. So we have the object as value because in the end it's of the type object, because everything is an object in Ruby. And then we can start looking into the things that we're going to do. So as I said, we will have the call of this done in Ruby. So we're going to receive a Ruby number that we need to convert to a Crystal number, that we need to do the summation here. We get the Crystal number converted back to a Ruby number, and then Ruby will be able to print that out or do whatever we want to do with this summation. Okay, so how do we do that? We need to define functions in here that do that for us, that do receive a value and then return an int for crystal, and the opposite is also true. So we do have another one that we receive an int for crystal and then returns us a value or an object in Ruby. Inside of our source code, Ruby source code, you're going to see that there is one method that converts a C long long, which is a big num in C, into an instance of Ruby integer. So this is what we need. So let's declare this function. So it is now available for us, but the code that's going to be executed is the one that's inside of the environment. So the source code that we have for Ruby is the one that has the implementation of the method that we're going to make available for us here. Okay, so it receives a long long and returns a value, a Ruby object. So receives long long, let's call it value here. Okay, int64 would be the long long in crystal here, and then we return a value. So that's what we need to do also. And we need one method that's going to do the opposite for us. So it will receive a value and will return, give us back int64, right? So referring again to the source code of Ruby, you'll see that there is a method called converts an instance of numeric Ruby numeric into C long long. So the name of the method is this one. To make it available for us, we need to declare it in here. Okay, so now we can use those methods to do the conversions that we're going to need here. So let's talk about this conversion. Def summation with type conversion that receives a Ruby number of the type Ruby object value, yeah. And then we can use this to make the conversion. So crystal int is equal to crystal lib dot rb that receives, let's copy here, that receives a Ruby value. So this is what we want. And then returns back an int64. Okay, now that we have this value in crystal, we can use in our summation. So let's do that very same. So crystal int, and that's it. But this method here is going to be called inside of Ruby because it has the type conversion from one side to from one language to another. Then we need to also convert it back to what Ruby knows. So let's do the conversion. Crystal dot. Now we have the opposite one, which is L to inum that receives the value that was generated by our method here. Okay, we have the method, we have the conversions. How do we make it available here? Okay, so to do so, we need to create a class in Ruby because everything has a class or at least a module. Let's work with the class here and then put the method inside of this class. To do so, we need to generate a function that gives us back a Ruby class. We can come here to the source and we will find out that there is a method called Ruby define class that receives a name and a value for super. Okay, so let's do the same definition in here. Function Ruby define class that receives a name of the type string and a super of the type value, because this is a Ruby object, and it returns back a Ruby object. So let's do the same here. Okay, now we can define our class, but we need the method inside of this class. So let's make the definition of the method that also allow us to make the definition of the method inside of the class. Ruby define method is what we're going to be using. So Ruby define method that receives a class of the type value, right? Method name, so name of the type UI string, Then we do receive the function. Let's leave it blank for now. Let's call it func, but do nothing for now because we don't know how to do so yet. And the arity or argc. So argc of the type int64. Well, we have an error here because we did not define our function. And there is a catch here. That's why I left this one for later on, which is basically we do have our function that we know that receives a value of Ruby, and then it returns a Ruby value also. So returns value. Okay, why is there a catch here? Because when we are defining the method inside of a class in Ruby, for disambiguation, we do have the self keyword, which it gives you back the instance that you are working on. To have it available in all of the objects in Ruby, the way Ruby does it is to obligate you to receive the first value as self. So you are obliged to have the first argument here as the value. Therefore, we need to do so here the same. And because of that, we do need to also put that information in here. So the first one is self of the type crystal value. Okay, then we have this problem here. Syntax error, cannot use self as parameter name. So self is also a reserved keyword in Crystal, and that's why we cannot use it in here. But there is a way to work that around. What is this way? We can use a proc. What is a proc? Proc represents a function pointer with an optional context. It is typically created with a proc literal and blah, blah, blah. But the way we're going to create that is like, where is it? Like this. So we're going to point that to what we want. So we're going to create the proc here, and we're going to have something that is the code. So we can make this into a proc because we do not need that available inside of the Crystal environment. We can put directly in our requirement so that we can use that in here. So it's no longer def because it's a proc. It equals to the same thing. We need to put a do here because now it's a proc, and it's okay. Now we can have self as the first argument. Okay, so this is the idea behind this. Now we need to create our class. We are inside of the require part of the code. So now we can create our class here. So let's call it Crystal. That uses crystal dot define Ruby define class. Oh, define class that receives a name, for instance, Crystal, and that do receive a super. And now you do understand why we do have a primordial object here, because then we use this as the super for the class that we are creating. And in the end, it's just an object because we are inheriting from object in Ruby. Okay, so crystal dot RB object. Okay, good thing. We do have our crystal class, but we do not have the method yet. So let's define it as well. So define method crystal dot define. Oh, I did not copy. Define Ruby define method that do receive a class. Good, I have a class here. A name, summation, just to keep the same name. A function. Okay, we do have our function here. And the arity. Well, apart from the self, the arity is 1 because we do have just the Ruby number as the value. We do have this working, or should. So now we need to make to compile it. To do so, we are using this make file. Do not pay much attention to the make file. If you want to refer to what is a make, then you can Google it and so on. I am using Mac OS here, and I do need to do some of the flags in here, use some of the libs and flags in here because of that and the way I'm compiling. But in the end, what we are doing, we are using the crystal to compile it, to cross compile it to my architecture, and then use GCC to compile that to a bundle that can be used in Ruby. So this is what we're doing in here. My GitHub under here do have more information about this code, with lots of comments in the lines and so on, so that you can refer to that. So if you want to get more in details, just go there, you'll find sources and so on. But right now, just believe me that this is the way you make a make. Okay, so let's run this in a terminal. And if we did do write everything okay, it should be okay to make it. So crystal to Ruby, ls. Oh, we do have the O here. I will delete it. ls. Okay, so make. If there are any compilation errors, non-compilation errors, you can see the crystal bundle is here. So let's try it out. chruby 3.0, and then we can just irb require the local crystal that we have. Okay, it works. Crystal.new.summation. And let's use, I don't know, 10. 10 should give us back 55. And it does. For 10 should be 6, and so on. So you see that this works. Now we have it working in Ruby. If you benchmark that, you'll see that this is way faster than doing the same method in Ruby. And that's the reason why we're doing this. So if you liked it, please thumbs up. If you have any comments, go to the comments section. And do not forget, if you want to improve your skills in Ruby on Rails, just get the course that is in the description. Bye bye.